So relationships, why are relationships a priority?
Why are they a priority? We have to kind of go backwards a little bit and ask ourselves, what's our greatest asset that we have? Our stuff, our money, none of those really. The greatest asset we have is time, because we don't know how much we have left, and so we want to use it the best way we can. And then we ask ourselves, well, what do I do with my time? Well, the greatest investment of my time is in people. Uh, we get these opportunities to have relationships with others and to learn from other people and to invest in other people. And the Bible says God created us in his likeness and his image, and for the purpose of having really a relationship with him. And then from that, he gives us the opportunity to have relationships with others. Uh, Relationships, we think about uh, how am I going to live my life? And what am I going to do in my life that really matters with this amount of time that I have available to me? Investing it in people and trying to obviously to help others to be better, and at the same time gleaning things for myself that can help me to be a better person. Relationships should be a priority for us in our lives. That and I know that some folks would say I'm just an introvert and I want to live to myself, and but when we think about what we've got on this earth, this time that we have, and what am I going to do with it, and how am I going to not necessarily, some people would say, make a difference, and but how am I going to be a good steward of it, a good manager of however much I'm granted in this life. So I think that that is why relationships should be a priority to all of us.
One thing you said, and this kind of hits home. Introverts, their excuse is why go out and build relationships. Do you have anything else you would add to that? Because I'm a pretty quiet person, and I don't actively go out and build relationships.
So, whether we, have 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, just this last week turned 51, hope to have 60, 70, 80, 90 years. I've been, there's been people who have went outside of themselves to invest in me and to help me. And really, I'm called to be a steward of what's been given to me. I'm not saying that we should just go out on the streets and just look for people to be part of their lives, because I don't think it's that difficult. I think I know that the Lord brings people across our lives, and when that person in front of you, that open door, you're to take advantage of it for the purpose of sharpening each other, helping each other, encouraging one another, and making each other better. I think a mistake we make in relationships is, what is in it for me? And really, that's the wrong approach. If it's all about me, then it's not a relationship.
Yeah, it's a two-way street there. Okay. It's a kind of a good segue into our next question here. What are some things that you look for when meeting new people that will determine, whether this is a relationship you should try to nurture and build, or it's something that, hey, maybe this could actually be more toxic than it will be positive. Is there any red flags that you notice?
Right. We don't want to, just jump into a situation, relationship with somebody that um, obviously is going to hurt us, or um, another big one is draining us. That someone whose approach is what can I get, what can I get, and you just feel like you're the giver all the time. One of the things that I look for in conversation is this person selfish? meaning is everything about them? Are they, trying to control the conversation or always have to have something to say? Automatically, those are some things that just tell you that, um, and it may be somebody that you think is interesting. They've, maybe there's a certain area where they are proficient in, and you want to learn from them. But just from talking about them, it's like, hey, I've got to understand going into this that this is going to be, as far as a relationship, it's going to be one-sided. Um, they're, they're not necessarily going to be giving. They're not going to be looking at me and saying, "How can I help this person? How can I invest in them?" Um, they may help me, but it's going to be from me asking them, and it's going to be one-sided. Um, but the we get that from seeing how do they sell themselves, probably not a right word, but how do they present themselves? Am I selfish or selfless? And that helps with determining my, when I say investment or involvement in that relationship, um, uh, what steps I'm going to take in getting to know them and uh, having some type of dialogue with them.
I like that. Yeah. So a red flag would be like, is this situation going to, or this relationship going to be one-sided? Um, if you didn't know that like this person has narcissistic traits, which I think we all inherently have those because we're human, it's just built into us. But like if they have a very narcissistic personality and that's just kind of who they are, um, and you didn't realize this when you built the relationship with them, how do you begin to deal with that without just cutting them off? Maybe they are a close friend, I guess.
Right. And you don't know what they're dealing with, what's going on in their life. You don't know, okay, why is this person, maybe it is somebody that you've known from a childhood, but maybe it's just someone that you've just met recently and work or something brought you together and there is a connection, but then you find out, hey, this person's all about themselves. And, it's just as selfish for me if I'm looking at somebody like that and I realize that it's just as selfish for me to just push away and say, no, I don't have time for them. I'm really being no different because I'm thinking about myself. So you asked, what are some things you can do? You're asking, how can I protect myself? And one of the things I would say is establish some boundaries. In these boundaries, you don't even need to tell them, and I would suggest that you do, but establish some boundaries of where am I going to meet them? Where are we going to, uh, 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 you know, what are we going to do for activities together that I feel like is a safe environment? And one thing I would say is control the environment so you're always in a place that you can get away from. And I'm not this type of person. What I'm going to say, but uh, with someone like this, you might want to be careful about having them in your home. Uh, Not that you wouldn't have them, but on a regular basis. Why? Because you can't get away from your home. That's where you live, and it's going to be you getting them out of there. And so if you're in a public place or at someone else's house, you're like, okay, this, and not meaning this in a bad way. You're just saying internally, okay, I've had enough. I need to have some distance from this person for a little bit. Then you can be in a place where you can walk away versus being stuck in your home. And because the last thing you want to do is end up saying something to them or reacting to their self-centeredness in a way that's not helpful to the relationship. If we, as we spend time with people, we begin to start to be like them, and that can be bad and good. But if you're able to control the environment and so forth, there is a good possibility that you can, if you want to say, rub off on them or influence them in, how can we direct what we're doing, or how can we direct our conversation. So it's about other people, not even about each other, but about other people, and helping others, and investing in other people. The key there, I would say, is establish boundaries, and then say, "Hey, I'm going to do everything I can to try and control the environment where I have a relationship with this person."
I like that. I like that. Yeah, so be conscious of it, set intentional boundaries. Don't cut them off, because that would be essentially being extremely selfish yourself, but just be cautious.
Yes, yes,
Awesome.
and look for opportunities to show them something different. We're a product of our environment, how we grew up. We were just talking about this today, that selfish parents 9 times out of 10 raise selfish kids, and selfless parents raise selfless kids, and it's not 100%, but you can. It's interesting. You can watch uh, uh, people, and you can, without even knowing their parents, you can pretty much get an idea of how their parents live their lives. But it doesn't mean we're stuck like that. It doesn't mean that that's just how we're going to be. We all have people that come across our lives and speak into us, and as we listen, as we let them, we start to change. There's things about how I used to look at things, and I don't look at those things the same anymore. But it's been because of the influence of people who were not like me, but yet were willing to uh, invest in me.
Controlling your environment. I think that's really key, is wherever you're at with your friends, make sure you have like a escape, a way to get away. So,
Yes.
Yeah, because
And,
growing up in
and
Parsons, it was, yeah.
oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, growing up in Parsons, like we'd have church kids come, and it was like my parents were always like careful of who they let us hang out with, and so we would go to the park and hang out, but it was always important. Like they did not want us going over to their house, so it's like you can't escape. It's harder to escape that. So make sure it's a public area. But anyway, so I thought that was really, really important. That's what really stuck out to me.
And as you build relationships that are healthy, that in a healthy relationship is a relationship that feeds both sides, and you've got two people that are looking out for the interest of the other. As you develop those in your life, then those are the ones who um, you're going to want to bring closer, because they're I think obviously the best example of that would be our spouse, and that they would complete us. But even as a young married guy, I didn't have a clue what all that meant. But as now going on 29 years being married, I understand that my transparency with her, and allowing her to speak into me makes me a better person. And but you don't always. Every relationship is not always this. I gotta have this guardrail up. As they develop, and as you realize that, hey, they care as much about my good as I'm trying to care about theirs, then that some of those guardrails, obviously, you take those down.
That puts us into like the next question is like, because I think some people do this, is like, what are some of the fears of relationships or of starting new relationships? And I guess I would put like how to overcome those fears or how to put up guardrails to protect from, because normally we go into a worst case scenario, like, okay, I'm going to meet this new person. What's the worst possible thing that could happen? And so I guess like, what's your thought on that? Of like just some of the fears and how we can overcome them, or how we can put up guardrails to protect us from our fears?
I think obviously our biggest fear is that of getting hurt. Inviting somebody in, uh, you know, um, opening the door for that conversation, and it not going anyway the way we thought it would go. Um, you know, I think one of those is maybe even somebody that of them, you've heard about them. Maybe there's someone that's popular, and you get the opportunity to meet them and maybe even have a one-on-one conversation, and you go into it with this expectation, and it's nothing of what you're like. Their personality, either on the air or wherever, was this way, but then when I met them in person, they're not even a likable person. And so our fear is that of getting hurt. And I say number two, our fear is that of saying goodbye. Um, I see that often. We here where we live have a lot of military, and they are usually here for 2 to 3 years and then gone. And the if I'm transparent, one of the probably the biggest deciding factor for me about coming to a Black River to pastor the church was I am a people person, and I don't. I'm not a fan of saying goodbye. I like to do life with people. I like to be around people, and I am prior service myself, and so I knew what that meant. I knew that they were not going to be here long, and I would develop a relationship just to say goodbye. And we have this saying of saying "until I see you again," instead of saying goodbye, because you never know. I mean, a lot of times they can come back through here, another rotation, but and I see that with the military that come in that very casual, but are reserved about getting involved because they know they got to say goodbye. And I think those are one and two of our fears of relationships. Am I is this going to be? Is this going to hurt me? If it's this person that I've looked up to, and I get to meet them, and then find out I don't even like them, or am I going to have to say goodbye to them, and that emotional disconnection? Those are two things that uh, I think stand out for us as far as why we can be more reserved about getting into a new relationship. One of the reasons, though, we should, we talked about the fear, but why should we not let that fear limit us? We go back to what we started with. It's time. We don't know how much time we have, and we don't know why this person has been brought across our path. And it may be for us to help them or them to help us, but we can't, when we allow the fear to control whether we'll get into the relationship, then it's all about us again, and not about how can I help someone else, or how can I allow someone else to help me.
That's a good way to put it. When we're fearful, we're making it about us. Huh. That's an interesting thought. Isaac, you were saying something just earlier.
I just had that realization where it's like it's just rooted in fear, like how John was saying that. Like we don't start relationships, or I don't know. It's something to think about for sure. It's rooted in fear, the fact that maybe we don't. So I'll be thinking about that a little bit.
Be sitting on the edge of the bed, asking yourself Jordan Peterson questions of, why am I not succeeding in this area? So why am I fearful? Did I make my bed this morning? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's almost like a self-sabotaging sort of thing.
Little
Yes.
bit.
It's like you have the opportunity, but you don't because you're too afraid, and then you don't realize that you're too afraid, and then you build excuses off of that, and it's all just rooted in fear, even if it's not realized, you know. So it's something to be introspective about, I guess. Asking yourself that why.
It
Why?
causes us to ask ourselves the question, what am I missing out on? Either what am I missing out on helping someone else, or what am I missing out on that this person has, to make me a better person?
And it goes both ways. Like, how can you help them be a better person
Right.
too?
Mm-hmm. So that kind of puts us to another question. As we're doing that, we step into creating a new relationship with somebody. How do I stick to my values, and have that relationship with someone else, that don't hold the same values? Because there's going to be opportunities to do different things, and you don't want to come off as uh, how's the way to put it? Not changeable, to a degree, but at the same time, you want to stick to your core beliefs. So I guess that's kind of the questions. How do you stick to your own values while at the same time, um, having other people in your life with opposite values?
I would say that first, that I don't have to agree with you in every area to have a relationship with you. I have to go back and ask self, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of relationship? If the purpose is what I can get out of it, then it's not really a relationship. It's just me taking away something. But it's two sided, and everywhere we made in every aspect of life, whether business or casual, church, you're going to meet people that are different than you, have been raised different than you. I married a lady from Germany, and growing up in different countries, come together, very different backgrounds, and we've had to learn how to do life together. And some things for her, just like, wow, this is different, and vice versa with me. Um, but your values, that's who you are, and if they are, we don't change who we are. That's kind of what brings us together. And you talk about the marriage relationship, a husband and wife. Most cases, you're not exactly like your wife, and she's not exactly right like you are. You've got some differences, and those differences allow you to complete each other. Now, if it's someone that maybe it's when I say forced relationship, you have to interact with them because of work, and they've got some lifestyle choices that are very different than yours. It's one of those situations. Hey, we agree to disagree, and most likely we're not going to talk about those things, but we've still got to interact together. Maybe we have to do business together. Maybe whatever the situation is, we can still be cordial. We can still try to help one another. And if I like, can use the word sharpen, or make the other person better. And I try to look at it this way. Everybody is my teacher. Everybody can help me, everybody can. Sometimes it's showing me things of what not to do. I hope that that's not the case with me most of the time. I hope I'm not showing somebody what not to do, but I'm sure I've made some mistakes. And somebody's like, "Well, I wouldn't do that," um, but just because we're different in, say, religion, politics, whatever it is, that doesn't mean that we can't have a relationship together. There's, I look at it this way: there's a purpose that person has been brought across your path, and our responsibility is to kind of figure out what that is, and to approach it not selfishly. They believe a certain way about something, and you're different. That's probably not the topic of conversation you're going to bring up. What do we have that's the same? How can we better one another and approach that relationship that way? But not to, again, if you automatically look at someone and say, you know what, you've got a different opinion, you're on the wrong side on this issue, I'm just going to push you away. That's just as selfish as, uh, you know, uh, that's not doing anything to try and help the relationship.
What are some big mistakes we make in relationships ourselves that we do? I don't know how to say it, like unconsciously we make mistakes. What are some of those that you've noticed, like you do, or everybody on level?
And I like this question. We talk about relationships. This is, my wife and I do quite a bit of, I say marriage counseling, but just talking to married couples and helping them with the stage of life they're in, and just talking to them about it. And I don't know which order to replace these in, one or two. I would say, okay, number one is the biggest mistake we make in relationships is number one, communication, and really a lack of communication. Um, communication, it's usually not in talking. It's communication and listening. We are, I guess by nature, not good listeners. Uh, even if we don't talk a lot, we're usually not really listening to what they're saying. We hear them, but we don't listen to what they're saying. Number two is a big mistake we make in relationship is unrealistic or unmet expectations. We go into a relationship, again, if I can use the husband and wife scenario, they go into relationship with the expectation of what they know. The husband goes in with the expectation of how he watched his mom and his dad. The wife, same thing. They go in with that expectation, and then a lot of times they never talk about it. They just, oh, I expect, my mom, made my dad breakfast every day. And she got up, had coffee for him, made him breakfast every day. And you get up day two of your honeymoon, is like, okay, where's the eggs and bacon and coffee? And she's not even out of bed yet. And we don't have communication. We go into it with these expectations that are not realistic, and and therefore they're not met, and um, it causes strife in this relationship. Um, it all goes back to communication. Um, we've got to ask more questions, because what happens when we ask questions, it causes us to listen. We get to find out where are they coming from, what is their expectations, why do they feel that way, and we get to, and asking those questions, we get to know them, and vice versa. And that communication then helps us with what is realistic expectations from this relationship. Huge mistakes that I see over and over in relationships is a lack of communication, where they're not listening. They find talking to be heard, but not listening or not asking questions. And then, like I said, secondly, unrealistic expectations, which end up being unmet expectations.
I have a question. You mentioned communication quite a bit, and obviously there's that honeymoon phase in any relationship, where it's like everything's new, you're asking all these questions. But like, what happens when you've been in a relationship for a couple years and you get to know each other pretty well? This could be married, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. How do you find more questions to ask? Like, where do you dig to find those new questions to learn each other, learn more about each other?
You obviously got to, on purpose, spend time with each other. You talk about that marriage relationship. You talk about that parent-child relationship. You're wise to study them, to get to know them. And a lot of it is not verbal communication. A lot of it is watching, listening. I like to use this phrase, and Dalton's heard me use it often: doing life together. You don't have an agenda. You're not on purpose. You're just, this is what we're doing. We're working in the garden. We're going fishing. We are going to have dinner, and just spending time with them. I have, as I mentioned, my wife and I will be married 29 years this year. We have 2 children. My son's going to be 20. My daughter's going to be 18. And the more you put into it, the less you make it about yourself, and the more you make it about them. I don't know that we exhaust learning about someone. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, but you just talk about, like, with my wife. I know enough right now. I'm still chewing on it, but yeah, 29 years. I think I'm scratching the surface with knowing her, and obviously I know a lot more than when we first got married. But early on for me, it was, I didn't know how to do a relationship. I didn't know. My focus was very selfish. It was what's in it for me. What can I get out of it? And not realizing that obviously the husband and wife, that we're to complete each other, and that's something you've got to study and work at. You've got to learn them, and that goes hand in hand with children. You've got to learn them, and how do they deal with different things, so that you know how to relate to them. Tie it right into a friendship relationship. You may know all their stories and stuff, but the next step is, okay, now I want to study them. Why are they the way they are? What motivates them? What challenges them? And get to know them on a different level. As we, and you see what happens with that. We're constantly making less and less about me and more about them. And in so doing, making it more about them, you are becoming better. Even though you're not trying, you're becoming better. they're making you a better listener. They're helping you to be a better student of people. All of these different things because you're willing to invest yourself in them.
I like that. So it's not like sit down and have an interrogation. It's more like just be intentional with living together. And then moments for questions or moments for learning about each other will arise.
Yes, I would say this: be where you're at. You're be there in the moment. We mentioned this earlier about being a good listener. Um, their body language, their how they respond, it all, but be there, be present, and just like y'all when we were before we jumped in with the podcast, you said, hey, we just kind of use some questions, but allow it to develop. Same thing. Allow that conversation to happen. You talk about the parent-child relationship. I would try to create events so that I could have a conversation either with my son or with my daughter. And can I tell you, it rarely ever worked that way. Either they didn't want to talk, or whatever. But then when I wasn't thinking about it, it wasn't even on my radar. It's 11 o'clock at night. All of a sudden, one of them sitting in front of me, and they're ready to talk. And wisdom, and I won't say that I always got this. I get it now. Wisdom says you turn off whatever you're doing, and they got you, because that's when something constructive is going to happen. Now, it's not necessarily that way in friendship relationships and spouse relationships, but definitely with children. I've learned over the years that those have been the most powerful conversations that we've had. Is they show up in front of me, or out of the blue is like, here they are, and we're having this very deep conversation, and that's the time you throw the phone away. You don't let anything get in the way of that, because that's when they're open and they're asking, hey, speak into me. Take advantage of that.
I'm sitting there thinking like that's something I definitely do. Is I'm like, I'll be sitting there thinking of the next 10 things I have to do, rather than just being which I think is like every guy ever, or the next 20 things. We're thinking ahead in time and like, okay, I got to make sure I got to get this right, when we should just be shutting that off and focusing on what's going on right in front of you. And so, yeah, I love that. Definitely a mistake that we make. So 2 more questions. And we kind of already hit this one a little bit, but how do you start the recovery of a damaged relationship?
It begins with it not being about you. And now this is hard, because we're just, if you want to use a Bible term, we're just sinful creatures. We're naturally self-oriented. We're naturally, put up the guard and the protection of ourselves. And so we've got to look at it that, hey, this is not about me. And, it's natural that we want to protect ourselves, that, hey, you hurt me once, you're not going to hurt me twice. And, but at the same time, we can't, the answer there is to put up maybe some more guardrails, but not be willing to not be the type of person just says, nope, you've had your limit. I'm not going to open the door anymore. I've closed the door. It's barred closed. No more. Because we don't know why they're back in our lives. We don't know why they're there. It as we said, it begins with realizing it's not all about me. Secondly, that we're willing to forgive. We all make mistakes. We all say things we shouldn't. We all do things that we shouldn't. And realizing that, hey, what's my greatest asset? Time. I don't know how much time I have left. We far too often we see, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s that for whatever reason their life is over, and we realize, hey, life is too short, and everybody needs a second chance, and we approach that relationship that second, sometimes third, fourth times, and maybe there's more guardrails up, there's more protections, but um, the obviously I'm not going to leave that door wide open so they can come in and hurt me or hurt my family again. But I'm not going to completely shut them off either. Uh, I want to be available for, to be a conduit. How can I be kind to them? How can I help them? And now flip the coin. What if it's us that we've done something wrong to somebody else, and we're wanting to restore that relationship? You think of maybe I'm the son that really gave his parents a hard time growing up, and to some degree I did. Um, uh, just wanting to do what everybody else was doing, getting in trouble, and so forth. And uh, it and I became I had these difficult stages in life as a young person, and high school especially, and then got out of high school. I went into the military, and my parents' last, kind of relationship with me was, going through that process of getting me out of, I was on probation, different things, getting me out of trouble, getting my back on my feet and so forth, and then me going into the military. And so that was their last having a relationship with me. I get sent to Germany, and after being in Germany for almost 2 years, I go to church, and that's the first time in my life I hear about Christ, who He is, and what He's done for us, and going on to die on the cross for our sins, and so that we could have a home in heaven. And I made a decision. I saw my need for Christ, and I made a decision to accept Christ as my Savior. And immediately, I started thinking about my family. But guess what? My family did not necessarily want to talk to me about that. Why? Because the relationship that they knew with me was, you know, John, the one getting in trouble, John, the one that, we're driving around everywhere because he couldn't drive, and helping him out of all of his mistakes he made. And so it took a while for to be able to have that type of conversation with them because of the mistakes I had made. And so I had to give them space. I had to give them room to to see me in a different light, if you would. Um, so the recovery process for us to someone else is not about ourselves, but the recovery process also, that we're trying to restore a relationship that we've caused the damage. We've got to give them space. We've got to allow them to open that door back up, and allow us to come back in, not try to force it, because they may have not forgiven us yet. They may have not gotten over however we wronged them. And many years later, grateful now that the relationship between, especially my parents, my siblings, and so forth, um, are been restored. But it took a while. I was 16 and just had my license a few months, and my brother's a year and a half older than me, and he had saved his money and bought a brand new car, and he was crazy enough to let his brother borrow it one night, and he hadn't had that car a month, and I destroyed it. And can I tell you, it took quite a few months before he would even have a conversation with me. Luckily, we had insurance, and he got another car, but he was very upset with me, and that caused a divide between us. And so whatever side of the equation you're on, you can't be selfish about it. You've got to be willing to forgive, and you got to be willing to give them the opportunity to let you back in.
Love that. Got to be patient with them.
Yes.
Mm.
Because they're patient with you. Two-way street here.
Yes.
Well, that brings us to our last question, which I kind of think we already kind of came to the answer. But what does a successful relationship look like?
A relationship takes two people. Okay. It is where each party's focus is the other. You're looking at the individual. How can I help this person? How can I encourage this person? How can I strengthen this person? And I will tell you, especially in a marriage relationship, if that is your approach, you receive as much as you give. And I wish I could say for 29 years of marriage, that's the way it's been. It wasn't. For years, it was, what can I get out of this? And why are you not doing this for me? And not thinking about, well, what am I doing? A successful relationship takes both parties investing in it, both parties giving of themselves, not having that selfish focus. And we talk about who's our worst enemy, the person you look at in the mirror. We're just naturally, that's who we are. And that's our looking out for number one. But a successful relationship is say, hey, it's not about me. I don't have to have preference or priority. It's what can I do for this other person? How can I help them? And how can I invest in them? And as one person said, and I don't remember the statistics here, but many of us get to be a friend. Some of us have friends. Few of us, those people are the same. Meaning, the person that I've chosen to befriend is also the person who has chosen to befriend me. And those type of relationships, I think we have a lot of acquaintances in life, but those types of friendship relationships, well, there's a lot of them in our life. But when we got one, we're wise to be a good steward of it and appreciate it, and always approach it with, what can I give to it? How can I strengthen it? Because you're going to get back. Unfortunately, our natural instinct is, what as I can get out, instead of what can I give in. And as we realize that the more I give in, I'm going to get out. So successful relationship, it takes both parties focused on the other.
Takes both parties focused on the other. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's you have to be intentional.
Yes.
All right.
Well, that was all our questions. I think we pretty much nailed it there, dude. There were so many good little quotes throughout this whole episode that my mind was just like grabbing. I'm gonna have to watch it back through, like write some of them down. That's pretty good.